"Pull back," the radio screamed. "That is a direct order. Pull back now." Alex Kane pressed her back against the shattered rock, blood running hot from her shoulder. Max locked against her leg like a statue made of muscle and instinct. 35 other dogs held the same. Not one of them moved toward the extraction route. Not one handler pulled a lead. Below them, in a ravine churning with enemy fire, an Air Force pilot was bleeding out on borrowed time. Alex looked at her dogs, at her people, at the mountain that was trying to kill all of them. She keyed her radio and said the only thing that was true. "They're not leaving. Neither are we." If you're watching this unfold and you feel your heart hammering, you're exactly where we want you. Subscribe to our channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from, because this story is traveling, and we want to see how far it's gone. The mission briefing had lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes to cover insertion coordinates, weather windows, comms frequencies, and the location of one downed Air Force pilot in a ravine southeast of Firebase Bravo. 11 minutes for what the operations officer called a low-complexity extraction. "Get in, locate Captain Sarah Holloway, get out. No enemy presence confirmed in the target grid. Air support on standby." Captain Alex Kane had sat in that briefing room and counted the words that worried her. Confirmed. Standby. Low complexity. She had been in enough confirmed clear valleys that turned into kill zones to know what those words actually meant. They meant someone had looked at a satellite image and decided the math worked. They meant nobody had walked that ground. She had said nothing. You didn't say nothing because you were afraid. You said nothing because you had learned across 9 years of this that the men who ran briefings didn't want to hear the math that lived in your body. They wanted compliance and timeline confirmation. "We're wheels up at 0430, the operations officer had said. Questions? No one had raised a hand. Alex had looked at Max, who was sitting at her left boot, watching her face the way he always did when she was working something through. His brown eyes moved with her. She had scratched behind his ear once, a quick, firm press of her fingers, and he had leaned into it for exactly 1 second before straightening back to attention. That was Max. 3 years together, 2 deployments, 114 confirmed missions. He had never once let her walk into something she should have walked away from without telling her first. She was telling herself that at 0552, when the first RPG turned the lead vehicle into fire and metal, and the 11-minute briefing became something that belonged to a different world entirely. The road up into Kunar province does things to sound. The mountains fold noise back on itself, so an explosion can seem to come from everywhere at once, and by the time your brain has sorted direction, you've already made 3 decisions, 2 of them wrong. Alex had learned that in her first deployment. She'd relearned it in her second. By her third, she had stopped trying to locate sound and started trusting Max. Max had gone rigid before the RPG hit. Not a growl, not a bark. Just that full-body lock, every muscle switching on at once, his nose working furiously at something she couldn't smell and couldn't hear. "Contact," she had said into her radio, half a second before the world came apart. The convoy had been moving in 2 vehicles. The lead vehicle took the hit broadside. Alex's vehicle stopped hard, the driver throwing them into reverse before the smoke had even settled, and Alex was already out the door with Max's lead in one hand and her rifle in the other, pulling toward cover along the road's upper edge. "We've got casualties in Vehicle 1, Sergeant Damon Cruz said into the net, his voice flat and measured the way it always got when things went bad. Cruz handled a Belgian Malinois named Petra, 3 years on the job, 15 pounds lighter than Max, and twice as fast. He had been riding in the second vehicle with Alex. "I count 2 down, 1 mobile." "Holloway's position," Alex said. "Still in the ravine. Beacon's active. She's 300 meters southeast." 300 meters. In open ground, 30 seconds. In this terrain, in this situation, it might as well have been 3 miles. "Command, this is Kane. We've got a vehicle hit on Route Alpha 7 approximately 900 meters from the target. We need air support on our position now." The radio crackled. A pause that lasted too long. Then, "Kane, this is Bravo Actual. Be advised, air assets are delayed. Weather over the ridge. ETA is 40 minutes. She had stared at the handset for 1 full second. 40 minutes, Cruz said beside her. I heard it. We can't hold here 40 minutes. I know that too. Max was working the air in front of her head, moving in small, precise arcs. She watched him. His body was telling her there were people in the rocks to the northeast, which matched the angle of fire that had taken out Vehicle 1, and something else. Something further south, below the road that was moving. Cruz. Petra's got anything south of us. Cruz was already watching his dog. Petra had turned southeast, ears angled, and was doing the same low-frequency nose work that Max was doing. Yeah, Cruz said quietly. Yeah, she's got something. That's a flanking element. Coming up through the ravine, Alex felt the full shape of it land on her. At once, the ambush wasn't just the RPG team on the high ground. It was an anvil and a hammer. The RPG hit was meant to stop the convoy. The fighters moving through the ravine were meant to close the vice. And somewhere in between, Sarah Holloway was lying injured with a survival beacon screaming her location to anyone with a receiver. She keyed her radio. Bravo, actual. Be advised we have a flanking element moving through the ravine southeast of our position. Pilot's beacon is active and broadcasting. Enemy may have a fix on her location. We need to move now. Kane, hold your position. Reinforce your perimeter and wait for air assets. Sir, if we hold position, we lose the pilot. That is an order, Captain. The line went quiet. Cruz was looking at her. The 12 other handlers in their element were spread along the road's upper edge, each dog locked on a different angle of threat. 36 animals working the air and the ground and the sound in concert, a network of senses that no technology had ever come close to replicating. Not one of the dogs was looking toward the extraction route. Every single one of them was oriented southeast. You know what they're telling us, Cruz said. Yeah, Alex said. She looked at Max. He looked back at her, and in that look was everything: the 3 years, the 114 missions, the 1,000 moments she had trusted him and been right. His ears were forward. His body was coiled. He was not afraid. He was ready. They're not leaving, she said. Neither are we. She had 7 minutes before the flanking element would be close enough to cut them off from the ravine entirely. She knew this not because Command had told her command was 40 minutes away and thinking about weather, but because Max and Petra and the other 34 dogs were telling her through their bodies, through the direction of their attention, through the mounting urgency of their signals. 7 minutes, maybe 8. She pulled Cruz close. Here's what we do. Mendez takes 6 handlers north with the RPG suppression element. I need those guns on the high ground pinned. Vasquez takes 4 handlers and moves to Vehicle 1, gets the casualties stable and to cover. You and I take the remaining 3 teams southeast into the ravine. That leaves us with 6 dogs for a flanking element intercept. 6 of the best dogs on this mountain. Cruz chewed on that for exactly 2 seconds. Holloway's condition. Beacons active. She was broadcasting a voice signal 2 hours ago. Broken arm, possible concussion, mobile, but slow. She's alive. She was 2 hours ago. Let's make sure she still is. Cruz nodded once. That was all he ever needed. Alex moved down the line, pulling each handler in by the collar, delivering instructions in low, rapid sentences that left no room for interpretation. Mendez, big, steady, unflappable, with a shepherd named Duke, who could locate a heartbeat through concrete, took the north element without blinking. Vasquez, who was 23 and had been in country for 4 months, went pale for a moment before tightening his jaw and moving toward Vehicle 1. Alex watched him go. She thought about what it meant to send someone that young toward burning metal. Then she stopped thinking about it because she had a ravine to reach in 7 minutes, and the dogs were already moving. Max led point as he always did, working 15 feet ahead of Alex at the edge of his lead, nose down, and then up and then down again, reading the ground and the air in alternating layers. Cruz was 6 feet back on Alex's left shoulder with Petra. Behind them, in a loose, staggered line, came Sergeant Torres with a shepherd named Ghost Corporal Wybara, with a Malinois named Rook, and Staff Sergeant Kim, with a black lab named Fuse, the only lab in the unit, and the one every handler argued should have been washed out 3 years ago, and none of them would trade for anything. They moved without speaking. Hand signals only. Alex kept her rifle up and her eyes on Max's tail, which was the most honest compass she'd ever had. When the tail went stiff, she stopped. When it moved in short, quick swings, she moved faster. The ravine opened below them through a cut in the rock that was maybe 4 feet wide at the top and widened as it descended. Max stopped at the lip and turned his head back to her. She read the gesture immediately, something below close, not moving. She held up a closed fist. Everyone froze. She eased to the edge and looked down. Sarah Holloway was wedged against the ravine wall 15 feet below her right arm, held tight against her body, her flight suit torn at the shoulder. She had her sidearm out and pointed at Alex before Alex had finished drawing breath. "Seal," Alex said, clipped and quiet. "Captain Kane, I've got dogs." Holloway didn't lower the weapon immediately. Her eyes moved up, cataloging. Then they found Max, who was looking down at her with that patient, absolute attention he reserved for injured people and suspects, and something in her face changed. "How many of them?" Holloway said. "6 on this element, 30 more on the perimeter." "There's a fighter team moving through the lower ravine. I heard them 10 minutes ago. At least 4, maybe 6. "We know. Our dogs have them." Holloway finally lowered the weapon. "You have 11 minutes before they reach this position." Alex looked at Cruz. "Make it 8. "Copy," Cruz said, and was already moving Ghost and Rook to the south end of the ravine lip. Getting Holloway up the ravine face took 4 of those 8 minutes. 2 of them spent on a rope extraction with Holloway biting down on something unsaid every time her broken arm moved, and 2 of them spent on the technical problem of getting her over the lip without putting weight on the arm. She didn't make a sound that could be heard at any distance. Alex had operated alongside Air Force pilots before and found them variable. Holloway was not variable. Holloway was a specific kind of person who had decided at some point in her life that pain was information, not an event. "You've got a concussion," Alex said, checking her pupils. "I'm aware. How's your vision?" "Doubled for the first hour, mostly single now." "Can you walk?" "I've been walking since I hit the bottom. I crawled to this position from the crash site. That's 400 meters. Alex stared at her for a moment. "Yeah, okay." "Don't say okay like that. I can hear what you mean by it." "I mean, you're going to be fine." "I know what you mean," Holloway said. "I mean, don't say it like I need the encouragement." Behind them, Max had moved to Alex's right side and was working the air with increasing urgency, his nose lifting in rapid short bursts. Alex felt it before Cruz said it. "Contact south," Cruz said. "Petra's locked." Ghost and Rook went rigid at the same moment on the ravine lip. 5 feet to their right, Fuse sat down abruptly, which was his alert, the thing that had gotten him washed out, laughed at in training, and had turned out to be exactly as accurate as any dog in the unit. When Fuse sat down, there was a human being within 40 meters. "4 of them," Cruz said, reading his dogs. "Southeast approach. They're moving fast." Alex did the math in half a second. 4 fighters moving fast from the south, the RPG element on the high ground to the north, the road cut off air support 40 minutes away. The extraction route they'd planned back up to the road northeast to vehicle recovery, then overland to the primary LZ, was now a route that ran directly between 2 converging threats. "There's a secondary LZ," Holloway said. Alex looked at her. "You know this terrain. I mapped it before the mission. It's what I do." She said it without particular pride, just fact. 4 kilometers west-southwest. It's longer, but it avoids the high ground entirely, and the lower ravine runs away from it. 4 kilometers with a broken arm and a possible concussion. "And 36 dogs," Holloway said. "I've done more with less." Alex keyed her radio. "Mendez status on the north element. RPG team is suppressed. They're not moving. But I've got a second element coming up behind them, looks like reinforcements." "How long do you have?" 20 minutes, maybe less. Pull back to route Alpha 7 and move to the secondary LZ. I'm sending you coordinates now. She looked at Holloway. Give me the LZ position. Holloway recited the grid from memory. No hesitation, no checking anything. Alex transmitted it and then looked at Max, who was still working the south approach with everything he had. We move, she said. Hempt. The first engagement came 90 seconds into their movement west. Max had been running 15 feet ahead when he spun back hard. No warning. No graduated response. Just a full reversal of direction. Body low, completely silent. Alex went to ground before she'd processed the signal consciously. The round that passed overhead was close enough that she felt the pressure of it. Contact west, she said completely flat. That's not right, Cruz said. That's not our flanking element. No, that's a third element. She felt something cold move through her chest. They knew our alternate route. The silence on the radio lasted exactly long enough to be telling. Someone had told them. She didn't say it aloud. Not here, not now, not with 4 fighters closing from the south, and a third element cutting off their west movement, and a secondary LZ that had apparently been anticipated. She filed it away in that part of her mind where she kept things that had to be addressed later, and she concentrated on the 30 seconds in front of her. Holloway, she said. I heard it, Holloway said. She was already down sidearm, up bad arm pressed to her body. They knew the LZ. Seems that way. That means someone talked. Yeah. From the mission briefing. I know. Holloway looked at her across 3 feet of rocky ground with an expression that was equal parts fury and cold calculation. You had a bad feeling about the briefing. It was not a question. Alex didn't answer it. Instead, she looked at Max, who had repositioned to her left and was now working a different angle, not the west contact, not the south approach, but something north of west, slightly elevated a direction nobody had been watching. She watched him work it for 5 seconds. Then she understood what he was telling her. There's a ridgeline, she said, turning to Cruz. Cruz looked at Max. Looked at the terrain. Yeah. 40 meters. If we can get there before the west element repositions, we can hold it with 6 dogs and 5 guns for long enough. Long enough for what? Long enough for me to think of something better. Cruz actually smiled at that. It was the specific smile he got when he was scared and trusted her. Anyway, she'd seen it in Yemen, she'd seen it in Syria, she'd seen it twice in this country already. It meant he was in. She looked back at Holloway. How fast can you move? Holloway had already started moving. The 40 meters to the ridgeline took 3 minutes because they moved in bounds 2 people up, while 3 covered the dogs, cycling through alert positions, with a coordination that would have looked choreographed if you didn't know that no one had rehearsed it. This was just what 36 dogs and their handlers became after enough time in the field together. A single organism with many brains parsing threat from 36 different angles simultaneously. Fuse sat down twice on the way up. Both times Alex adjusted their route, and both times she heard movement in the direction Fuse had flagged close enough to confirm that he was right and that they would have walked into it. She had stopped wondering a long time ago what it would take to convince the people in the briefing rooms. The ridgeline was narrow and gave them a commanding view of 3 approach angles and dead ground on the 4th. Alex put Ghost and Rook on the dead ground side because Ghost could hear through rock, and Rook had the kind of nose that had once located a buried weapons cache from 200 meters. She put Max beside her because Max was where Max went. Mendez, she said into the radio. Sit rep. Static. Then, we're moving. Lost contact with the reinforcing element. They may have broken off. Vasquez has the casualties stable. Good. New plan. There's a ridgeline at... She gave the grid. Get everyone here. We consolidate and we find an extraction option that isn't compromised. How do you know the LZ is compromised? Because we got shot at from the approach vector. A pause. Copy. She clicked off and looked at Holloway, who had seated herself against a rock, with her bad arm in a self-fashioned sling, made from a piece of her flight suit, and was watching the southern approach with professional attention. "The intel from your mission," Alex said. "What about it?" "Is it worth what's happening right now?" Holloway took a breath. "There's a coordination network. Logistics, finance, communication. It runs through 3 provinces, and it has a node inside Bagram." She said it quietly and evenly, like she was reading from a report. "I was photographing the 3rd relay point when I got hit. The photographs are in my flight recorder, and the recorder is still in the aircraft." Alex stared at her. "The crash site," Holloway said, "is 160 meters south of your position. That's where the flanking element came from." "I know." "They're not here for you," Alex said slowly. "They're here for the recorder." "The recorder," Holloway said, "is why someone in the briefing room told them our LZ." Max shifted beside Alex, his weight moving subtly to her left side, the thing he did when the information had changed, and he wanted her to know he knew it had changed. She put her hand on his back. He leaned into it for 1 second. Then every dog on the ridgeline went rigid at once. "They're coming," Cruz said. Alex raised her rifle. 36 dogs held the line. Below them in the dark, and the rocks and the mountain air, the enemy moved toward them, and somewhere 160 meters south, in a wrecked aircraft with a flight recorder full of names, the reason for all of it, was waiting. Every dog on that ridgeline went rigid at the same moment, and that alone told Alex everything she needed to know about what was coming. Not one animal made a sound. That was the part that got to people who hadn't worked with military K9s. They expected barking aggression noise. What they got instead was this absolute weaponized stillness. 36 animals locking onto the same threat frequency, simultaneously their bodies becoming instruments tuned to a register no human ear could reach. It was the most frightening thing Alex had ever seen, and she had seen it dozens of times. "How many?" she said to Cruz, not a question, a request for his read. Cruz was watching Petra, who had her nose working in rapid, shallow bursts. "South approach, that's our flanking element, the 4 we identified earlier, but Max is doing something different." Alex was already watching Max. He had turned 15 degrees east of where Petra was focused, his entire body oriented on a point that didn't correspond to either known threat vector. "East," she said. "That's the crash site direction." "They sent a recovery team for the recorder, while the main element pins us on the ridgeline." She said it quietly, working it out in real time. The flanking element was never the main effort. It was the distraction. Holloway made a sound that was not quite a word. Alex looked at her. "They knew exactly what was on that recorder," Holloway said. Her voice was controlled, but there was something underneath it. Not fear, something older and colder than fear. "This wasn't opportunistic. Someone planned this before I ever flew that mission." "Who knew your target grid?" "My squadron CO, the intelligence officer, 2 analysts at Bagram." She paused. "And whoever was in your briefing room." Alex filed that away again in the same place she'd been filing things all night. That place was getting crowded. "Cruz," she said. "I need you and Petra on the south approach. Hold them off the ridgeline. You've got Ghost and Rook, use them to channel any advance into the dead ground on our left, where we have the angle." "How long do you need?" 10 minutes. Cruz looked at her with that smile again. "Going for the recorder." "Going for the recorder." "With 2 dogs and a pilot who has a broken arm and a concussion." 3 dogs, Holloway said from her position against the rock. "I count Max." Cruz looked at Holloway, then back at Alex. He shook his head once, not refusal, just the specific gesture he made when the situation was objectively unreasonable and he was going to help anyway. 10 minutes, he said. "Then I'm pulling back whether you're back or not." "You won't have to." "I know I won't. I'm saying it anyway." He moved away along the ridgeline, already positioning Ghost and Rook, with hand signals, the dogs flowing into their assigned sectors with the quiet efficiency of long practice. Alex turned to Holloway. "I need you to tell me exactly where that recorder is in the aircraft." "Aft fuselage, left side behind the ejection seat rail. There's a yellow pull handle release. The recorder is in a red case about the size of a hardback book. Secured. Magnetically, one pull releases it. Can you run? Holloway stood up without answering. Which was an answer. Stay on my right side. Max will lead. If he stops, you stop. If I go down, you take the recorder and you move north to the ridgeline, and you don't come back for me. That is an order, Captain. You understand? Holloway looked at her for a moment with an expression that said she understood and disagreed and would comply. Understood. Good. Alex looked at Max. Find it, she said. Max moved. Catch a mag. 160 meters sounds like nothing until you're moving it in the dark across broken mountain terrain with a hostile recovery team somewhere between you and the objective. Alex counted her steps and watched Max's tail and kept Holloway in her peripheral vision on every stride. The pilot moved well, not quietly, because a broken arm changes the way a body distributes weight, and that change shows up in footfall, but well. Controlled. Deliberate. She didn't favor the arm ostentatiously. She just moved with it, held close, and worked around the pain the way experienced people learn to work around pain by pretending it belongs to someone else. They were 60 meters from the crash site when Max stopped. Alex went down to a knee instantly. Holloway mirrored her a half step later. Max's head was up, nose working east, not toward the crash site, east along the base of the ridgeline. His tail was doing that short swing motion that meant movement, and the frequency of the swings was telling Alex the movement was close and getting closer. She held up 2 fingers. Holloway read it 2 contacts. Then Max shifted his nose slightly north of east, and the tail frequency changed. 3. Alex did the calculation in the space of 1 breath. 3-person recovery team moving toward the crash site from the east, approximately 40 meters out. She and Holloway were 60 meters from the aircraft on the west approach. If the recovery team was moving at anything close to standard pace, they would reach the crash site in roughly 4 minutes. Alex and Holloway could reach it in 2. They had a 2-minute window. She tapped Holloway on the shoulder, pointed toward the crash site, held up 2 fingers, and then pointed at her watch. Holloway nodded. Alex held Max's lead tight, bent to his ear, and whispered 1 word. Quiet. Max understood quiet. He had understood it since he was 14 months old, and they'd worked it into his training as a separate command precisely because there were situations where detection meant death. He moved forward without the rustling, scent-spreading body swings of normal tracking work, pulling his signature down to almost nothing. They covered the 60 meters in 90 seconds. The aircraft was on its left side against the ravine wall. The canopy gone, the cockpit crushed on the far side, but the fuselage largely intact. Holloway was already moving to the aft section. Before Alex had taken a full look at the geometry of the site, her right hand working the exterior, by touch her left arm tight against her chest. 30 seconds, Holloway said. Alex positioned herself on Holloway's left, watching the east approach, one eye on Max. Max was between them and the ravine, oriented east, motionless. The 3-person team was still out there, still moving. 20 seconds, Holloway said. From the ridgeline to the north, Alex heard the first shot. Then 2 more in quick succession. Crews had contact. The flanking element from the south had pushed, and he was answering. The sound was managed controlled fire. Not panic, but it meant his 10-minute clock had started for real. Holloway. I have it. A sound of something releasing a magnetic clunk. I have it. Alex turned. Holloway was holding a red case roughly the size and shape of a hardback book. The yellow release handle still attached her face, doing the thing where she was managing a level of relief so acute it was almost pain. Move, Alex said. Max was already turning back west before she said it, which meant the eastern team had shifted. They'd heard the gunfire from the ridgeline, and they were accelerating toward the crash site. Alex felt the compression of time, physically the way she always did in these moments, the world contracting to the next 10 seconds, the next decision, the next 20 meters. They ran. Max pushed pace on the return, moving faster than Alex would have said it herself, and she trusted that. He had something in his nose that she didn't have in her eyes, and whatever it was telling him they needed to move faster than was comfortable. Holloway ran behind Alex, the recorder clutched against her body, with her good arm, breathing in the disciplined rhythm of someone who had trained for this, even though nobody had specifically told her she'd need to run through a hostile recovery zone in Kunar province, with a broken arm, and a brain that was still slightly doubled. They were 30 meters from the ridgeline base when Max cut left without warning. Alex cut with him, grabbing Holloway's sleeve as she passed, pulling them both into the shadow of a rock outcrop. Holloway started to say something, and Alex put her hand once firmly on Holloway's forearm. Silence. Max was locked. Completely locked. Not the east approach team, that was a different angle. Something above them on the ridgeline itself. Alex's stomach dropped. Someone was on their ridgeline. She keyed her radio so briefly, it barely made a click. The signal she and Cruz had worked out years ago. That meant situation changed. Wait for me. 2 clicks came back immediately, which meant received and acknowledged. She did not transmit voice because she didn't know who else might be listening, and after what Holloway had told her about the briefing room, she was reconsidering everything. She pulled Holloway in close enough to feel her breath. "Someone's on the ridge," she said, lips barely moving. Holloway processed that with a stillness that Alex respected enormously. Then she tilted her head toward the recorder. Understanding what it meant. Understanding that the thing in her arms was why someone had planned all of this, and that the person on the ridgeline above them might not be the enemy she expected. "How many?" Holloway breathed. Alex looked at Max. His focus was tight, localized. "1, she said. "Maybe 2. Not Cruz's element. No. Cruz is south-facing. This is above us. North end of the ridge. That's the route we came in on." "Yeah." The implication sat between them for exactly the time it took to be unavoidable. The north route was how they'd reached the ridgeline originally. The only people who knew they were using it were people in the net. And the net, as they now understood, had at least one leak. Alex made herself breathe slowly and think clearly, which was the only thing she'd ever found that actually worked. You could not outrun panic. You could only decline to follow it. "There's a lower traverse," she said. 15 meters below the ridgeline crest. Takes us to Cruz's position from the east. "Can we get there from here?" "Max can find it." Holloway looked at the dog, who had not moved, then back at Alex. "Tell me when." Alex put her mouth to Max's ear. "Around," she said. Not a standard command, something she'd built with him over 2 years of specific training for specific situations. Around meant find the route that avoids the thing you're showing me. It was, as far as Alex knew, something no training manual had ever codified. It existed because she and Max had needed it to exist, and so they had built it together. Max pulled left and began moving along the base of the ridgeline, low and deliberate, searching for the traverse. He found it in 40 seconds. Cruz was down to 8 operational handlers on his southern line when Alex came in from the east. The flanking element had pushed twice the second push harder than the first, and Cruz had used Ghost and Rook to channel them into a bottleneck that his shooters had answered effectively. But the math was getting unfavorable. He had 3 handlers with minor injuries, one dog, a shepherd named Atlas, who had taken a fragment and was moving on adrenaline that would eventually run out, and an ammo situation that had about 12 minutes left in it at current expenditure. He saw Alex first, then Holloway, then the red case. "You got it," he said. Flat. Not surprised. The tone of a man who had stopped being surprised by Alex Kane a long time ago. "We've got a problem on the north end of the ridge," Alex said. "Someone in the net put people up there." Cruz's jaw tightened. "I had a feeling about that radio traffic 20 minutes ago. Command was asking for our exact position more than they needed to." "Which of our handsets?" "Mendez's." Alex looked around for Mendez, found him 15 meters back managing his north-facing element. She crossed to him in 8 steps. "Give me your handset," she said. Mendez looked at her. "What?" "Your radio. Give it to me. Right now." He unclipped it and handed it over without argument. He was the kind of senior NCO who understood when a question was actually a question and when it was something else. Alex pulled the battery pack and pocketed it. "We're going comms minimal from this point," she said to the element at large. "No transmissions to Bravo Actual. We route through our internal net only." "If we go dark to Command," someone started. "Command already knows where we are," Alex said. "That's the problem." The silence that followed was the particular silence of people recalibrating. It lasted about 4 seconds. Then Cruz said, "What's the plan?" "The recovery team for the aircraft is 3 people, and they're now at a crash site with nothing in it. The flanking element from the south has lost its push. The element on the North Ridge line is looking for us in a position we're no longer in." She felt the shape of the board as she spoke it. "We have a window. Small. Maybe 6 minutes. To do what?" "The LZ they knew about is compromised. But there's a secondary that's not in any transmission we've made since we went comms minimal. We'd have to transmit to get air assets." "I know someone we can transmit to directly," Holloway said. She had moved up beside Alex without being asked, the recorder still against her body. "My WSO is still on station above the weather layer. We've had a private frequency since flight school. I transmit on that frequency. He patches directly to the extraction birds. Nobody else in the net hears it." Cruz looked at her. "A personal frequency. We called it our gossip channel," Holloway said. "It's gotten considerably more serious tonight." Cruz looked at Alex. Alex looked at him. "Set it up," Alex said to Holloway. 4 kilometers west-southwest. New LZ. Get us a bird." Holloway was already working her survival radio with her good hand. The 6 minutes Alex had projected turned out to be 4, because Atlas, the fragment hit Shepard, alerted hard on the north approach just as they were beginning to move. His handler, Sergeant Briggs, caught the alert and got the word out in time. The North Ridgeline element had found the traverse and was moving down it toward their position. What they didn't know was that Cruz had moved Ghost and Rook to the traverse entrance 3 minutes earlier, precisely because Cruz had been thinking about it as a vulnerability since Alex mentioned it. What Ghost and Rook did to the North Ridgeline element's advance was clinical and immediate and required no further discussion. "Move," Cruz said, and the entire element moved. They went west. Southwest at a pace that was somewhere between a tactical movement and a controlled run. The dogs spread across a 30-meter front, the handlers and the 2 casualties from Vehicle 1 moving in the protected center. Holloway ran beside Alex, her private frequency already making contact with her WSO. Somewhere above the cloud layer, her voice low and precise, and giving nothing to the night except what was necessary. "Bird is 40 minutes from launch," she told Alex. "Not 40 minutes out, 40 minutes to get airborne." "From where?" "Jalalabad." Alex did the math on pace and distance and came up about 8 minutes short. "We move faster," she said. "I know," Holloway said. They moved faster. The second major contact came at the 2-kilometer mark, and it came from a direction that shouldn't have been possible. West. The direction they were moving. Max locked up at the same instant that Fuse sat down 30 meters to the south, and both signals said the same thing: multiple contacts close static. Not moving toward them. Waiting. Alex stopped the element with one raised fist and felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders like something physical. They had a blocking force ahead of them. The south was covered. The east was the direction they'd come from, where 3 hostile elements were now converging on a position they'd just vacated. The North Ridgeline was neutralized but would recover, and the west was blocked. She stood in the dark and the mountain air and thought, and Max pressed against her left leg, warm and steady, and she put her hand on his back without thinking about it and felt him breathe. "They're not moving," Cruz said quietly, reading his dogs. "That blocking force is in a static position. They're waiting for us to walk into them. They planned for the secondary LZ too. They planned for everything we were supposed to do," Alex said. And then she heard it, What she should have been hearing for the past 90 seconds and hadn't, because she'd been thinking about the blocking force and the math and the window she no longer had. What they didn't plan for, she said slowly, is what we do when we stop doing what we're supposed to do. Cruz waited. The blocking force is static, she said. That means they're where they decided to be before this mission started. They're in a pre-planned position. Right. Pre-planned based on what they were told about our movement. Right. They were told we'd go for the secondary LZ. She turned and looked north. Not northeast where the original road was. Not east where the converging elements were. Straight north, up and over the ridgeline they'd just come down from. Nobody told them we'd go back up. The silence lasted 2 seconds. Over the ridge, Cruz said. Over the ridge down the north face 1/2 kilometer to a flat ground approach that any bird can use. That's not an LZ. Not a designated one. We'd have to. I know. He thought about it for 3 seconds, which for Cruz was a long time. Then he turned to Holloway. Your WSO, can he relay updated coordinates to the extraction birds? Already told him to stand by for coordinate changes, Holloway said. Cruz looked at her with what Alex recognized as his version of deep respect, which looked exactly like barely concealed amazement. You planned for that. I planned for everything, Holloway said. That's also what I do. Max was still pressed against Alex's leg. She looked down at him. He looked back up at her, that absolute patient attention, that complete and uncomplicated readiness. North, she said. He turned north, and the whole element turned with him, and behind them, the blocking force waited in a position that was no longer relevant, and ahead of them, the ridgeline rose into the dark, with everything that was hard and necessary and real. The ridgeline going up was harder than the ridgeline going down had been, and the ridgeline going down had nearly killed 2 of them. Alex felt it in her legs first, then in her lungs, then in that deep place behind the sternum where exhaustion lives before it becomes something you have to name. She didn't name it. She counted steps instead, an old trick something a trainer had taught her in BUD/S when she was 22 and convinced she was going to die on a beach in Coronado. Count steps. Don't count time. Time is the enemy. Steps are just math. Max was 15 feet ahead of her, pulling upward with the particular energy he got when he understood the mission had changed, and the new version was more urgent than the old one. She had seen that energy before. It was not frantic. It was the opposite of frantic. It was a dog who had made a decision and was executing it. And the decision was that everyone behind him was going to reach the top of this ridge. Behind her, she could hear the element moving. Handlers, casualties, Holloway. The 2 injured men from Vehicle 1 were being supported between able-bodied handlers, which slowed everything down and was completely non-negotiable. You didn't leave your people. That was the only rule that never had an exception. Contact south, Cruz said from the rear of the element. His voice was even. Flanking team found our trail. They're moving north. How far back? 4 minutes, maybe 5. Alex calculated pace versus grade versus 4 minutes and came out where she always came out in these situations. It was going to be close, and close was going to have to be enough. Push, she said, and the element pushed. Vasquez was the one who went down first, and it wasn't from enemy fire. He had been supporting one of the Vehicle 1 casualties on his left side for 40 minutes, taking the man's weight across his own shoulders while maintaining his rifle in his right hand, and watching his dog, a young German shepherd named Cole, with the fragmented attention of someone doing 3 things at once. Cole was 18 months old, the youngest dog in the unit, still learning the texture of sustained operations. Vasquez had been Cole's handler for 7 months. They were still finding each other. The rock that caught Vasquez's boot was nothing. A standard mountain rock in a mountain full of them, but his left leg was carrying weight. It wasn't designed to carry at that angle, and when it rolled badly. He went down hard and took the casualty with him, and the sound of it, a short, sharp expletive, and then the heavier sound of 2 people hitting ground moved through Alex like an electric current. She was back to them in 6 steps. The casualty specialist Ramos, 20 years old, A through and through in his left thigh that had been field-dressed and was on his hands and knees breathing. Vasquez was sitting up, his right hand on his ankle, his face doing the specific thing faces do when the pain is real and the person is trying to decide how real to let it be. "Talk to me," Alex said. "I'm good," Vasquez said immediately. "That's not what I asked." He looked up at her. Cole was beside him, pressing against his right side, and Vasquez had his hand on the dog's back without seeming to know he'd put it there. "It's the ankle. I can move. Can you support Ramos?" A pause. 1 second. The honest second. "No." "Okay." She looked up. Briggs. Briggs was already moving toward them. Atlas, his fragment-hit shepherd, was still running on that adrenaline Alex had clocked earlier, but the dog's movement had developed a compensation on the left rear that told her the adrenaline was thinning. She filed it and addressed the immediate problem. "Briggs takes Ramos. Vasquez, you move on Cole. Cole's job is you, nothing else. You read." Vasquez nodded. He got to his feet with the ankle and didn't make a sound that could be heard at any distance, which told Alex that 23 years old or not, he had what this work required. Cole pressed against his leg, and Vasquez moved, and the element moved with him. They reached the ridgeline crest with 2 minutes and 40 seconds to spare before the flanking element reached their last confirmed position. Alex knew this because Cruz was reading Petra constantly and providing her updates in the flat numerical way he always did when the situation was critical and precision mattered more than anything else. The north face of the ridge was steeper than the south face. She had known that from Holloway's terrain description and had accounted for it, and accounting for it in the abstract and meeting it in reality were two different experiences separated by about 40 feet of near-vertical rock. "Holloway," Alex said. "I see it," Holloway said. "Your arm." "I see that too." She looked at the face for 1 second. "Give me a tether point. I'll use my legs." "You'll use your legs and my hand and you won't argue about either." Holloway looked at her. Then she did something Alex hadn't expected. She laughed. A short, compressed sound that was equal parts exhaustion and genuine amusement. "You are exactly what I was told you were," she said. "What were you told? Impossible to work with. Indispensable to have." She shifted the recorder against her body and presented her good arm. "Lead the way, Captain." Alex took her arm and they went over the crest together. The north face descent took 11 minutes and cost them one more minor injury. Torres slipped on a loose section and caught himself with his rifle, which saved him from the fall, and bent the barrel in a way that made the weapon decorative. He switched to his sidearm without comment, and kept moving, which was the correct response, and the only one Alex had expected from Torres. Ghost handled the descent by essentially finding his own route 2 meters to the left of the human path, which was consistently better than the human path, and twice he paused at a point that looked viable and looked back at the handlers with an expression that Alex could only describe as professional disappointment. "He thinks we're slow," Cruz said. "He's not wrong," Alex said. At the base of the north face, the terrain flattened into a broad approach that Holloway confirmed matched her mental map. Half a kilometer of flat ground to a position that could receive a helicopter, not a designated LZ, no markings, no prepared surface, but flat and open and unreported in any transmission that had been compromised. Holloway had her survival radio to her ear. "My WSO has the birds. They're 22 minutes out. Relay the coordinates." Holloway did reading from memory, which Alex had stopped being surprised by approximately 40 minutes ago. The woman's mind was a filed cabinet that never jammed. 22 minutes, Cruz said. "We've got time," Alex said, "if nothing else moves." And then Atlas sat down. It was not Fuse's deliberate trained alert sit. It was the sit of a dog whose body had finally collected the bill for everything it had been asked to pay. Atlas simply stopped moving on his injured rear leg, sat in the way that gravity dictates when the engine quits, and looked at Briggs with an expression that was not surrender. Atlas was constitutionally incapable of surrender, but was the honest acknowledgement of a professional who had hit the wall. Briggs went to his knees beside him immediately. His hands moved over the dog's body with the efficiency of someone who had done this assessment many times, but his face was doing something that the efficiency couldn't quite cover. Briggs had been with Atlas for 4 years. 4 years was a long time. 4 years was a particular kind of relationship that people who hadn't done it couldn't fully understand, and people who had done it never adequately explained. "How bad?" Alex said. "Fragments deep. He's been compensating for, I don't know, an hour. More." Briggs looked up. "He can't walk it." "Then he doesn't walk it." She made the decision in the same second she understood it needed to be made. "Briggs carries him." "That's... You can carry him and move at pace, or I can assign someone else, and you can take their load. Your choice, Sergeant." Briggs looked at her. He looked at Atlas. He gathered the dog against his chest in the carry that every handler practiced, and hoped never to need in the field 70 pounds of shepherd arranged across his arms, with Atlas's head on his shoulder. The dog made one sound, a low, private sound that had nothing to do with pain, and then was quiet. Briggs stood up and kept moving. Alex watched him for 1 second, and felt something move through her that she did not have a name for, and did not need one. Then she turned forward and walked. They were 300 meters from the flat ground position when Max stopped and turned his head south-southwest. Alex felt the cold clarity of it land on her like water. South-southwest was not the flanking element from the south face. That team was behind the ridge now on the wrong side of 1,200 feet of rock. South-southwest was a new direction, a new threat, something that had not existed in her calculation 4 minutes ago. "Cruise," she said. "I've got it," he said. He was already reading Petra, who had locked on to the same bearing. "Vehicle, moving north." "How far?" "Petra's got the engine noise. Maybe 800 meters. One vehicle or multiple?" Cruz watched his dog. "Petra's giving me single source." "That's not a hostile advance element. That's one vehicle moving north on an approach we don't have mapped. Could be a redirect. Someone figured out we went over the ridge. Or," Holloway said from behind them, and her voice had something in it that made Alex turn around, "it's not hostile." Alex looked at her. "My WSO," Holloway said. "I told him our position on the north face. He has a contact at Firebase Bravo, not command someone he trusts personally. If he called that contact, he sent a vehicle. He sends vehicles when I tell him not to wait for the official process," Holloway said. "We've been doing this for 6 years. He knows when the official process is the problem." Alex looked at Cruz. Cruz was watching Petra, who had not escalated her alert. The dog's body was reading threat assessment, not threat confirmation. She was processing the vehicle, not locking onto it as hostile. "Max," Alex said. Max had turned toward the vehicle bearing. He was standing with his nose up, reading the approach on the air. His tail was doing a movement Alex had only seen in specific situations. Not the threat swing, not the neutral hang, but a slow, low oscillation that she had learned over 3 years meant known or known adjacent. It meant something, and Max's remarkable nose was telling him this contact fit a category of people they had been around before. "He's reading friendly," Alex said. And even as she said it, she felt the tension of it, because everything tonight had been designed to make her trust the wrong thing at the wrong moment. And she knew that, and she also knew that at some point, you had to make a decision on the information you had. She keyed her radio on the internal net. "All elements, hold position. Do not engage the south-southwest vehicle contact. Stand by." Then she looked at Holloway. "Get your WSO on that radio, right now. I need confirmation." Holloway already had the radio up. She spoke 3 words into it, a name, a question, a number, and waited 4 seconds. The response came back in a voice Alex couldn't make out, but she could read Holloway's face, and Holloway's face was doing something it had not done once in the entirety of this mission. It was doing relief. "It's Sergeant First Class Ortega," Holloway said. My WSO's contact at Bravo. He's not in the command net. He heard the weather delay on air assets and came north independently. She paused. He brought a medic. The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough. He brought a medic, Cruz repeated, and his voice was entirely flat, which was how Cruz sounded when something mattered. Tell him to cut his lights and come straight in, Alex said. And tell him to stay off the command net until I tell him otherwise. Holloway relayed it. Ortega's vehicle reached their position in 4 minutes, and the medic, a young woman named Specialist Carver, who had the organized efficiency of someone twice her age, went directly to Ramos without being directed because Ortega had told her what to expect, and she had been doing this job long enough to know that the person with the worst wound got her first. Vasquez sat against the vehicle's rear wheel with his ankle and Cole against his side, and Cole was doing the thing that young dogs sometimes do when their handler is hurt, pressing in too close, too constant monitoring with an intensity that was both instinct and something else, something learned from 7 months of partnership. Vasquez kept his hand on the dog, and the dog kept his warmth against the handler, and nobody said anything about it because there was nothing to say. Briggs set Atlas down on the vehicle's flatbed, and the dog allowed it, which told Alex more about Atlas's condition than anything Briggs had said. Atlas did not allow himself to be set down on flatbeds. Atlas had opinions about dignity. The fact that he let it happen without a sound meant the leg had stopped being something he could manage. Carver finished her rapid assessment of Ramos, looked up at Alex and said, "He needs a hospital, soon, but not immediately." Define soon. 2 hours, maybe 3. The dressing is holding, but it won't hold forever. We have a bird inbound, 17 minutes. That's fine. She was already moving to Vasquez. What else? Pilot with a broken arm and a head injury. Dog with a fragment in his rear quarter. Carver blinked once. The dog. In that order, yes. Carver looked at Briggs and Atlas on the flatbed. She was not a veterinarian. She knew this, and Alex knew this. But she was a medic with functioning hands and a kit, and Atlas was a military working dog who had taken a fragment and run on it for an hour, and sometimes that was what the situation offered. "Tell me where," Carver said to Briggs. Briggs told her. She went to work. So, 12 minutes. The bird was 12 minutes out when the command net crackled back to life on the one handset Alex had left operational, her own, which she'd kept live specifically to monitor what command was doing while command was no longer monitoring them. The voice that came through was not the operations officer. It was not Bravo Actual. It was a voice she had heard only twice before at a command level that should not have been directly on this frequency at this hour, and the fact that it was told her the situation had escalated in ways that were happening parallel to everything on this mountain. "All elements, this is Colonel Hargrove. I am assuming direct command of this operation. All personnel are ordered to hold position and await official extraction assets. Acknowledge." Alex looked at the handset. Cruz was watching her. Ortega was watching her. Holloway had gone completely still. "That's the wrong colonel," Holloway said quietly. Alex looked at her. "What?" "Hargrove is not in the chain of command for this mission. He's not in any chain of command that touches this operation legitimately." She said it with the precision of someone who had memorized org charts the way other people memorized sports statistics. "He's Bagram Logistics. He has no operational authority here." "Then why is he on this frequency?" "Because someone gave it to him." Holloway's eyes went to the red case against her body. "Because that recorder has his name in it." The weight of it settled over the flat ground and the waiting dogs and the 12 people who had just crossed a mountain to reach this moment. Alex felt it not as surprise had left her vocabulary approximately 2 hours ago, but as confirmation. The shape of the thing was complete now. She could see all of it. Hargrove was the node. Hargrove was the logistics coordination that Holloway had been photographing from the air. Hargrove was why the briefing had felt wrong, why the LZ had been burned, why there were 3 separate hostile elements on a mountain that command had called low complexity. And Hargrove was now on the command net, ordering them to hold position and wait for official extraction assets that he would control. Alex picked up the handset. She keyed it. She said, "Bravo." "Actual, this is Kane. We have a medical emergency and an inbound bird 11 minutes out. We are proceeding with extraction. Out." She released the key before Hargrove could respond and looked at Cruz. "If they vector anything to intercept," Cruz started. "They won't," Holloway said. "Not with a bird already inbound from Jalalabad on a confirmed medevac request. If he interferes with that on record, he's already done." She paused. "He's going to try to get to us before the bird lands." "How?" "The same way he's been doing everything tonight." She looked at the dogs spread across the flat ground, 36 animals in various states of alert, all of them still working even now, reading the dark in every direction. "Through someone we haven't identified yet." Alex turned that over once. Then she made the decision she'd been building toward for 11 minutes since the moment Ortega's vehicle had rolled in, and she had realized they were no longer alone and moving but stationary and waiting, which was a different tactical problem. "Cruz, rearrange the dog positions, full 360. Nobody approaches this position from any direction without every dog in this element reading it first." Cruz moved without a word, pulling handlers by name, repositioning in 60 seconds with the economy of motion that came from doing this long enough that the choreography was internal. 36 dogs faced outward in every direction, and the flat ground became a perimeter, and the perimeter held everything that was theirs inside it, and everything that was coming outside it. And Max was at Alex's left side where he always was, and the bird was 9 minutes out. "Holloway," Alex said. "Yeah, when that bird lands, you and the recorder are the first thing on it." "I'm not leaving you." "The recorder is the mission. You're the recorder. You're the first thing on the bird." She said it without heat, without room for argument. "Everything that happened tonight, every person, every dog, it means nothing if that recorder doesn't reach someone who can't be touched by Hargrove." Holloway was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, "Who do I take it to? Who do you trust?" Another pause. Longer. The kind of pause where someone is doing an honest accounting of everyone they know. "There's a deputy inspector general at Bagram. She's been there 8 months, and she doesn't owe Hargrove anything because she doesn't owe anyone anything. I've met her twice." "Is she the kind of person who acts on what she's given? She prosecuted a general last year for procurement fraud." Holloway paused. "She acts. Then that's where you go." Alex looked at her. "And when you get there, you tell her everything. Not just the recorder. Everything. The briefing. The LZ. The command net transmission from Hargrove. Every single thing you heard and saw tonight." Holloway looked back at her with an expression that had moved past relief and past calculation and arrived somewhere that was quieter than either. "You know what this starts?" "Yeah. It doesn't stop at Hargrove." "I know. People are going to push back. Hard." "People can push," Alex said. "We've been pushed at tonight from 6 different directions, and we're still here." Somewhere in the dark behind her, Max shifted his weight. She felt it through her boot, that small press of warmth and presence that said, "I'm here. I've got you. We're in this. 6 minutes." Fuse sat down on the western approach. Cruz's head came up. "West contact." "Distance?" "Close. Moving fast." "How many?" He watched Fuse, watched Petra, watched the cascade of alerts moving through the 36 dogs as the information propagated through their shared network. "1, he said. "Just one. One person. Moving fast." From the west, which was the direction nothing was supposed to be coming from, because everything tonight had been mapped and planned and routed by someone who had decided in a briefing room that low complexity meant no surprises. Max turned west, and his tail went to that slow, low oscillation again. Known, or known adjacent. Alex turned west and brought her rifle up and said, "Identify yourself," into the dark, and the dark answered in a voice she had not expected. "Sergeant First Class Delgado, 3rd Special Forces Group. I've been tracking your element for 40 minutes. The voice was female, low-controlled, breathing hard from movement. I'm the one who flagged the Hargrove transmission to the Deegee's office 20 minutes ago. Alex held the rifle on the darkness for one full breath. How do I know that? She said. Because I'm standing in front of 36 military working dogs and I'm still talking, Delgado said. If they didn't like me, you'd know it. Alex looked at Max. Max's tail was moving. Not a threat swing, not the neutral hang, the slow, low oscillation. She lowered the rifle. Come in, she said. Delgado stepped into the perimeter, and the dogs read her. The way dogs read everything completely instantly without the filters that humans spend their whole lives building. Not one of them escalated. Max held his slow oscillation for 3 more seconds and then dropped to a neutral stand, which was as close to a formal welcome as Max ever offered a stranger. She was maybe 35, lean in the way of people who move constantly with the specific kind of dirt on her that said she'd been on this mountain longer than anyone in Alex's element. Her gear was 3rd group standard, but worn in the particular way of someone who had been operating independently. No unit patches, no visible rank. The kind of anonymous configuration that meant she'd been working somewhere that didn't want her name attached to anything. You said you flagged the Hargrove transmission, Alex said. To who specifically? Deputy Inspector General Warrant Officer Reyes. At Bagram. Delgado pulled a small device from her chest rig, a ruggedized satellite communicator, the kind that ran on a frequency separate from standard military comms. I've been building a file on Hargrove's logistics network for 11 weeks. Tonight was the first time he moved operationally. He's always been financial, Alex said. Not a question. Procurement transportation route coordination. He's been selling convoy schedules to 3 separate insurgent networks for 14 months. The money moves through a shell contracting company registered in Cyprus. Delgado looked at Holloway. Your reconnaissance target was his 3rd relay node. He couldn't let the photographs reach anyone with clearance to understand what they were looking at. Holloway was holding the red case the way people hold things they've paid a serious price for. He tried to have me killed to protect a Cyprus shell company. He tried to have all of you killed, Delgado said. You were collateral to the recorder. The others... She glanced at Alex at Cruz at the 12 handlers and 36 dogs spread across the flat ground, were collateral to the collateral. The silence that followed had a specific texture. It was the silence of people who had been in danger all night, understanding for the first time exactly what kind of danger it had been. Cruz broke it. 4 minutes, he said, listening. I can hear the bird. The helicopter came in without lights, which told Alex that Holloway's WSO had briefed the crew on the situation, and the crew had decided that lights were an invitation. It was a good crew. She hadn't met them, and she already trusted them, which was something about this work that she had never fully explained to anyone outside it. Carver had Ramos ready to move. IV running dressing reinforced the young specialist alert and tracking and trying very hard to look less hurt than he was. Vasquez was on his feet with Cole, his ankle wrapped tight by Carver's efficient hands, his weight distributed in the way of someone who had decided pain was a scheduling problem for later. Atlas was on Ortega's flatbed, still breathing steadily, Briggs's hand on his side. The bird flared, and the rotor wash hit them, and every dog on the perimeter turned their heads into it and held their positions. That was the part Alex always noticed, and never stopped being moved by 36 animals in the middle of everything. Turbine noise and wind, and the compression of every decision that had led to this moment, and not one of them left their post. She put her mouth close to Holloway's ear. You go first. Don't stop. Don't wait for me. Don't look back. I know, Holloway said. Reyes, Deputy IG, you walk directly to her office and you don't stop at anyone else's door first. I know that too. Holloway. Alex pulled back enough to look at her. Everything that's in that recorder, it has to come out whole, not pieces, not the parts that are easy, all of it. Holloway looked at her with the expression of someone who has been carrying a weight alone for long enough that having someone acknowledge it is its own kind of shock. I've been trying to get this information to the right people for 6 weeks, she said. Every channel I tried was either too slow or too watched, or both. She paused. Tonight was not how I would have chosen to do this. Neither would I. But here we are. Yeah, Alex said. Here we are. Holloway gripped her arm, once her good arm a firm press that said what neither of them had the language for right now, and then she moved to the bird. Loading took 4 minutes. Ramos first, then the second vehicle, one casualty, then Vasquez with his ankle, and Cole riding against his handler's legs. Atlas went on last, Briggs climbing in beside him with the dog arranged across his lap, 70 pounds of shepherd who had run on a fragment for an hour and was now finally being still. Holloway was already inside the recorder on her knees, her survival radio in her good hand, talking to her WSO with the low, precise efficiency of someone transmitting coordinates for a strike. The bird lifted. Alex watched it go. Max sat beside her and watched it too, and when the sound of the rotors faded past the ridge, he looked up at her once, and then looked back at the direction it had gone, as if he was making sure it was real and gone and done. 11 of us, Cruz said beside her, plus 29 dogs. And Ortega's vehicle. He looked at the communicator Delgado had handed Alex before the bird lifted the one with the direct line to Reyes's office at Bagram. What now? Now we drive north to a road that nobody compromised, Alex said, and we wait for a very specific phone call. Delgado was already moving toward Ortega's vehicle. I can get you to a firebase 12 kilometers north. It's not in Hargrove's logistics chain. He's never had access to its routing schedules. How do you know that? Because I spent 11 weeks mapping every firebase he does have access to. She said it without particular pride, the same way Holloway said I plan for everything, just fact. Firebase Kilo is the gap in his network. We go there, we're invisible to him. Alex looked at Cruz. Cruz looked at the dogs. The dogs, as always, were looking at everything else. Load up, Alex said. The drive north was the first moment in 4 hours where Alex was not in immediate motion, not making a decision with a time limit attached to it, not reading a dog or a radio or a hillside for the information that would keep her people alive. She sat in the front passenger seat of Ortega's vehicle with Max in the footwell against her boots, and she let the stillness of the moving vehicle happen around her. Her shoulder was aching. She had forgotten about the graze a round had clipped her during the initial contact on the road. She had registered it and categorized it as non-critical and moved it into the same internal folder as everything else that needed attention later. The folder was very full now, and the shoulder was making a case for immediate review. She pressed her palm against it and felt the dampness of the field dressing she'd applied in the first 2 minutes after the hit and had not thought about since. Still holding. Carver would have looked at it if Alex had let her, but there had been a specific and correct priority order for Carver's skills tonight, and Alex's shoulder had been appropriately last on the list. Max shifted against her boots. She moved her foot and he pressed into it, and she felt his warmth and his breathing, and the solid living weight of him, and something in her chest that had been locked tight since 0430, finally partially released. You did good tonight, she said to him, quietly, not for anyone else. Max's tail moved once against Ortega's floor mat. Cruz was in the rear seat with Petra, his head back, eyes closed, doing the thing he did after sustained operations, where he processed the last several hours in some internal way that he had never fully described to anyone. Petra was against his side. Cruz's hand was on her back. His face was completely still and completely awake, which was something that took years to learn and couldn't be taught. Delgado was in the back with 2 handlers who had been on the perimeter watching the communicator she'd given Alex with the specific attention of someone waiting for a signal they'd been waiting for a long time. Reyes will move fast, Delgado said. It wasn't comfort. It was assessment. When I briefed her 11 weeks ago on the preliminary file, she started the formal process before I was out of her office. She's the kind of person who understands that the time between receiving information and acting on it is when things disappear. She know about tonight, Alex said. She knows what I transmitted 40 minutes ago, which is the Hargrove command net intercept your element's position and the existence of the recorder. Delgado paused. She doesn't know about the blocking force on the secondary LZ yet, or the North Ridgeline element. That's 2 instances of operational coordination between Hargrove and hostile forces on a mountain in Kunar province, Alex said. On a night when he was on a command net he has no legitimate access to. That's not a corruption case anymore, Cruz said from the back seat, eyes still closed. That's aiding the enemy. The word sat in the vehicle for a moment. Treason was the word nobody had said yet. It was the word that changed the shape of everything. The 11 weeks, the 11-minute briefing, the 3 hostile elements, the Cyprus Shell Company, the 14 months of convoy schedules sold to people who use them to build bombs and plan ambushes. It changed the shape of every soldier who had been on a compromised convoy route in this province for over a year, and hadn't known why the enemy always seemed to know where they'd be. Alex picked up the communicator. Delgado. How do I reach Reyes directly on this? Channel 4. She's monitoring. Alex switched to Channel 4 and keyed it. Warrant Officer Reyes, this is Captain Alexandra Kane, SEAL Team 7. I'm transmitting from a vehicle north of Firebase Bravo with Sergeant First Class Delgado. I have additional information on the Hargrove network that did not go out on the earlier transmission. Do you copy? 3 seconds of static. Then a voice that was female unhurried, and had the particular quality of someone who was fully awake, and had been fully awake for some time before this call. Captain Kane, this is Reyes. I copy. Go ahead. Alex talked for 6 minutes. She talked about the briefing and the 11 minutes and the words that had worried her. She talked about the LZ that had been compromised before they reached it, and the blocking force on the secondary approach that had been in a pre-planned static position. She talked about the command net transmission from a colonel with no operational authority over her mission, and she talked about the North Ridgeline element that had moved toward a traverse route they had not transmitted. She talked about the flight recorder and Sarah Holloway's 6 weeks of trying to get information to someone who could use it. And then she said the thing she had been turning over since the moment Holloway had looked at her across 3 feet of rocky ravine ground, and said they knew the LZ. Whoever was in that briefing room knew our contingency routes, Alex said. Not just the primary LZ, the secondary. The alternate movement vectors. This was not a partial leak. This was comprehensive. The pause from Reyes's end was exactly 1 breath long. How many people were in that briefing? The operations officer, 4 staff, and 3 external liaisons. One of the liaisons I didn't recognize. I didn't ask for his name because I was focused on the mission math. She paused. I'm asking for his name now. I'll pull the briefing attendance log within the hour, Reyes said. Captain, I need you to understand that what you're describing taken together with the recorder and Delgado's preliminary file is... I know what it is, Alex said. A silence. Then, yes, I think you do. Another beat. Get to Firebase Kilo. I'll have a secure team there by 0700. Bring everything you have. Copy, Alex said. She set the communicator down and looked out the windshield at the road unrolling north in the headlights, and for a moment she let herself think about the shape of 0700, the debriefs, the sworn statements, the careful documented reconstruction of a night that had started as an 11-minute briefing and ended with a colonel on the wrong radio frequency on a mountain in Kunar province. Then the communicator in her hand crackled, and Delgado said, "Pick up," before Alex had registered the incoming signal. She keyed it. Kane. The voice that came back was Holloway's, still precise, still controlled, but with something running underneath it that was new. I'm at Bagram. I'm at the medical facility. They took the recorder. She stopped. Started again. Reyes has it. She was waiting when the bird landed. She had 2 agents with her, and they took the recorder directly into evidence. Good, Alex said. That's exactly what needed to happen. That's not Kane. A breath. The unidentified liaison from your briefing room. Reyes pulled the log. She just told me. Alex waited. It was a man named Sutter. Civilian contractor logistics oversight. He's been embedded at Firebase Bravo for 4 months. Holloway's voice was perfectly steady, and that steadiness cost something. He's listed in the recorder photographs as Hargrove's primary operational contact in the province. The man in your briefing room was Hargrove's handler. He was there to confirm your contingency routes and transmit them before you were wheels up. The vehicle was quiet. Ortega was driving with both hands on the wheel and his eyes forward. Cruz had opened his eyes. Delgado was watching Alex with the expression of someone who had built a file for 11 weeks and was watching the last piece of it lock into place. Alex felt the totality of it move through her. Not rage, not the thing that looks like rage, but is actually something colder and more structural. The sensation of a complete picture. All the information resolving into the single shape it had always been. The briefing room, the 11 minutes, the unknown man with the attendee credentials who had sat in the back and said nothing because he hadn't needed to say anything. He had needed only to listen. Reyes has Sutter, Alex said. She has an arrest team moving to his location on Bravo right now. And Hargrove. She's moving on Hargrove simultaneously. She said, a pause. Alex heard Holloway take one breath, something she had not done audibly in the entire time Alex had known her, which had been approximately 4 hours, and felt like significantly more. She said the recorder photographs are enough, not just for Hargrove, for the network, all 3 provinces. All 3 provinces. 14 months of convoy schedules. Every soldier who had been on a compromised route and hadn't known why the enemy was always waiting. The vehicle moved north. The dogs breathed in the dark. Max pressed against Alex's boots. Holloway, Alex said. Yeah. Your arm. They're setting it now. A pause. It's not as bad as it felt on the mountain. It never is. Kane. Holloway's voice did something subtle. It was not softness. It was not in Holloway's register to go soft, and Alex understood that and respected it. It was the specific thing that happens to a controlled person's voice when they are choosing to be direct about something that costs them to say directly. 6 weeks. I tried for 6 weeks to get this information through the right channels, and every channel was either watched or slow, or the wrong person was standing behind the right person. She stopped. Tonight was one night. And you went over a ridge in the dark with a broken element and 36 dogs. The dogs did most of it, Alex said. That's not a short sound. Not quite the compressed laugh from the mountain, but in the same family. That's not the point I'm making. I know what point you're making, Alex said. Get some sleep after they set the arm. You too. Yeah, Alex said. And she meant it the way she always meant things she said she would do, and then did not do, because 0700 was 3 hours away, and there were statements to organize, and 11 weeks of Delgado's file to walk Reyes through, and 31 dogs still in this vehicle and on the road, and needing their post-operation assessments, and handlers who had been running on adrenaline for 4 hours and would crash before dawn. She clicked off and looked at Cruz. Sutter, logistics contractor, he was in our briefing room. Cruz's jaw moved once. The way it moved when he was deciding not to say the first thing he thought. How many briefings has he sat in? That's the question Reyes is going to be asking him. How many routes? How many convoys? Cruz looked at the road. How many people? Nobody answered that because nobody in the vehicle had the number, and the number was going to be very large, and they all knew it, and sometimes you let the knowledge sit without speaking it, because some things deserve a moment of silence before they become part of the official record. Delgado broke it, and she broke it the way Delgado apparently broke everything directly without ceremony, with the information that needed to be said. Reyes is going to need all of you. Kane, Cruz, every handler who was on that mountain tonight. The formal deposition process starts at 0700, and it doesn't move fast. Weeks, maybe months. I know what an investigation looks like, Alex said. I know you do. I'm saying... Delgado paused, and it was the first time Alex had heard her pause, as if she was working something out. I've been running this file alone for 11 weeks. I couldn't talk to my CO because I didn't know his exposure. I couldn't go to command because command was the question. I've been... She stopped. Tonight was the first time since week 3 that I trusted anyone with any piece of this. Alex looked at her in the dark of the vehicle. At the specific kind of tired that comes not from one bad night, but from 11 weeks of carrying something alone, checking over your shoulder, trusting no one, and staying in the field anyway. You trusted the dogs, Alex said. Delgado blinked. Then something in her face shifted. Not the relief she'd been holding back, but the recognition of where it had come from. I walked into a perimeter of 36 military working dogs, and not one of them escalated. They read you right. They read me right, Delgado said. And the way she said it was the way people say things they will remember. Firebase Kilo came up in the headlights at 0340, a collection of structures behind wire on flat ground that Delgado had correctly identified as invisible to Hargrove's network. The gate guard was young and startled, and became significantly more startled when Ortega's vehicle disgorged 11 people and 29 dogs into his checkpoint lane. We need the duty officer, Alex said. Right now. The duty officer was a first lieutenant named Park, who looked 25 and handled the situation with the particular grace of someone who had been briefed at Kilo on the standard operating principle that when unusual things arrived, you contacted your superior and you provided what was needed, and you did not ask questions that would slow down either of those actions. He had them in a secured building with cots and water, and a working radio link to Bagram in under 8 minutes. Crews organized the handlers. The dogs got their assessments in order: water, physical check, rest. The animals who had been working in sustained high-stress conditions for 4 hours needed the same recovery protocol as the humans, and crews ran it with the same quiet efficiency. He ran everything moving down the line of handlers, checking each team, making notes in his head that would become a formal debrief report in the morning. Mendez and his north-facing element came in 40 minutes later, road-worn and low on ammunition and completely intact, which was the thing that mattered. Duke had a small laceration on his right ear that Mendez had already dressed. Everyone else was whole. Alex sat on a cot with Max against her side, and the duty officer's medic finally looking at her shoulder, which had decided that the removal of the tactical situation meant it was now appropriate to be aggressively present. The medic cleaned it and repackaged it and said, "You need this properly closed," in the tone of someone who knew the answer to the follow-up question already. "In the morning," Alex said. "That's what everyone says. Everyone's usually right." The medic taped it and left. Alex sat with her back against the wall and Max's warmth along her left side and the communicator on her knee. The firebase was quiet in the way of places where people are exhausted but not sleeping, the specific hum of people processing the low voices of handlers, talking to their dogs, the sound of water being poured. Cruz sat down on the cot across from her. Petra was already asleep against his boots, which Petra did with the professional efficiency of an animal that understood the value of recovery. "Say it," Alex said. "I'm not going to say anything," Cruz said. "You're doing the thing where you don't say something." "I do that all the time." "You do it with a specific face when it's about the mission." Cruz looked at her for a moment. Then, "The people on those convoy routes, the ones who went out on schedules that Sutter transmitted, for 14 months. He stopped. "We're going to know names." "Yeah. That's going to be..." He stopped again. "Yeah," Alex said. Neither of them said anything else about it because there wasn't anything to say that the morning wouldn't say better and more completely. The morning was going to have names and numbers and the formal language of official documentation, and it was going to be very hard and completely necessary, and the only way to honor the 14 months was to see it through to the end. Max shifted beside Alex, resettling his weight, his head going down to her thigh. She put her hand on the back of his neck where the fur was warmest, and she felt his breathing slow toward something close to sleep. "Delgado," Cruz said suddenly, not looking up. 11 weeks alone." "Yeah." "How does someone do that?" Alex thought about it. About 11 weeks of watching a network from the inside, trusting no one, carrying information that could get you killed if you transmitted it to the wrong person, staying in the field, because leaving meant the information never reached anyone. "The same way you do anything," she said. "You decide it matters more than it costs." The communicator buzzed once. Alex looked at it. A text format message from Reyes, brief and without decoration. "Hargrove in custody. Sutter in custody. Recorder in evidence. Formal process begins 0700. Bring everyone." She showed it to Cruz. He read it. He looked at Petra sleeping against his boots. He looked at Max against Alex's side. He looked at the room full of handlers and dogs who had gone over a ridge in the dark 4 hours ago on the specific judgment of one captain who had sat in an 11-minute briefing and known in the way that experience teaches you to know things before you can articulate them that something was deeply wrong. "Hey," he said. She looked at him. "You made the right call. Back on the road when they told us to hold and you said no." He said it flat and direct, the way Cruz said things he meant. "I want you to hear that now before 0700 makes it official." Alex held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked down at Max. At the top of his head, his ears relaxed for the first time in hours, his breathing the slow tide of a dog, finally completely at rest. "We all made it," she said. 0700 came, the way mornings come after nights, like that one, not gently, not with any of the softness that the word morning implies, but hard and bright and full of things that needed to be done immediately. Alex had slept 90 minutes. She knew this because she had looked at her watch before her eyes closed and looked at it again when Max shifted against her side, and she came awake the way she always came awake in the field, completely instantly, with no transition between sleep and full situational awareness. 90 minutes. Her shoulder had made its opinion of this known before she'd finished sitting up. Cruz was already standing Petra beside him, both of them looking like people who had decided the night was over and the day had requirements. Mendez was moving handlers through a morning protocol water dog assessment equipment check, with the systematic calm of a man who understood that structure was the thing that kept people functional after sustained operations. The firebase was louder than it had been at 0340, which meant Reyes's secure team had arrived. They had. 4 of them in civilian clothes that weren't fooling anyone with the kind of credentials that opened rooms and closed conversations. Their lead was a tall woman named Specialist Agent Foreign, who had the organized energy of someone running on institutional urgency and actual sleep, which Alex found briefly and purely enviable. "Captain Kane," Foreign said, crossing the room with her hand out. "Warrant Officer Reyes sends her acknowledgement of your transmission last night. She's conducting the primary interviews at Bagram. I'm here for preliminary statements from your element before transport." "How many interviews has Reyes run so far?" Alex said. "Hargrove's been in a room since 0215, Sutter since 0340. Foreign paused in the precise way of someone choosing what to say and what to hold. "Hargrove is not cooperating. Sutter cooperated for approximately 11 minutes before his legal representation arrived and then stopped." 11 minutes, Cruz said from across the room. 11 minutes. Foreign confirmed, and nobody in the room missed the number. "What did he give them in 11 minutes? Alex said. "Enough." Foreign looked at her directly. "I'm not authorized to share specifics at this stage. What I can tell you is that Reyes moved on 2 additional arrests at 0500 based on what came out of those 11 minutes. 2 additional arrests. Alex filed it without showing what she filed it as, which was the confirmation that the network had more nodes than Hargrove and Sutter, and that the 11 weeks of Delgado's file, and the 6 weeks of Holloway's reconnaissance, and the single night on a mountain in Kunar province had opened something that was going to take a very long time to close properly. "Where's Delgado?" Alex said. "She went to Bagram with the first transport at 0530, Foreign said. "She's with Reyes. The preliminary file she's been building is the foundation of the entire formal case." A pause. "Reyes said to tell you, and I'm quoting, that Delgado is exactly the kind of person she needed and couldn't find for 11 weeks. Alex thought about Delgado, walking into a perimeter of 36 military working dogs in the dark and waiting to be read. About the specific courage of that. About 11 weeks of running alone on a mountain's worth of information that could get you killed if you gave it to the wrong person. Tell Reyes she's right, Alex said. The preliminary statements took 3 hours. Foreign ran them efficiently, moving through each handler in sequence with a recorder and a legal pad, and the specific questioning style of someone who understood the difference between what a witness remembers and what a witness interprets, and who wanted the former clean before the latter could contaminate it. Alex went last. She sat across from Foreign in a room that Lieutenant Park had cleared of everything except 2 chairs and a table, and she talked for 40 minutes in the flat, sequential way she had been trained to debrief, starting from the 11-minute briefing and moving forward without editorializing, without emotional coloring, without the retrospective logic that the brain naturally applies to events. Once you know how they ended, just what she saw, what the dogs did, what she decided, and why. What happened next? Foreign wrote without looking up for most of it. When Alex reached the part about the Hargrove transmission on the command net, Foreign's pen stopped moving for exactly 2 seconds and then resumed. When Alex described Holloway's identification of Hargrove's role in the network, the pen stopped for 3 seconds. When Alex described the blocking force on the secondary LZ pre-planned static, waiting in a position that required comprehensive knowledge of their contingency routes, Foran set the pen down entirely. "You understand what you're describing," Foran said. "I understand what I'm describing," Alex said. "The formal term. I know the formal term. I've known it since 0200 last night." Alex looked at her evenly. "I'm describing it accurately so that the formal term can be applied accurately. That's what this process is for." Foran held her gaze for a moment. Then she picked up her pen. "Continue." Alex continued. At 1000, Reyes called on the secure communicator. She had a voice that matched the voice Alex had heard in the dark of Ortega's vehicle, unhurried, precise, with the particular quality of someone who had been in this work long enough to understand that urgency and speed were not the same thing, and that confusing them was how cases fell apart. "The recorder photographs," Reyes said, "document 47 separate instances of convoy route data transmitted to hostile networks over a 14-month period. Cross-referenced with incident reports from those routes, we have preliminary correlation on 23 engagements that are now being reclassified as non-random." 23 engagements. Alex held the communicator and let the number be what it was. "How many personnel?" she said. "We don't have a final count yet. The reclassification process takes time, but Captain..." A pause. "It's significant." "What's Hargrove saying?" "Nothing useful. His attorney is managing his silence very professionally." Reyes's tone carried something dry and brief in it. "Sutter's 11 minutes gave us the Cyprus account details and the name of the third node in the network. The 2 arrests at 0500 were the financial coordination layer. The money is frozen as of 0630. The network is intact above Hargrove." "We believe so. That's the next phase." Another pause longer than the first. "Captain Kane, I need to ask you something directly, and I need a direct answer." "Go ahead." "The operations officer who ran your briefing, Major Connolly." "A beat. Was there anything in his conduct during the briefing that suggested foreknowledge of the compromised elements?" Alex thought about Connolly, about the 11 minutes, about the words confirmed and standby and low complexity, about the external liaisons at the back of the room, one of whom had been Sutter. "No," she said. "Connolly ran the briefing the way he always runs briefings. He believed what he was presenting." She paused. "Sutter was at the back. Connolly introduced him as a logistics oversight rep, standard. Connolly didn't know what Sutter was doing with the information." "You're certain?" "I'm certain that Connolly's 11-minute briefing was the product of someone who had been given clean intelligence and didn't know it was dirty," Alex said. "He's not your problem. Whoever gave him that intelligence assessment is your problem." A silence. Then, "The intelligence assessment for your mission came from a single-source analyst report prepared at Bagram. The analyst is named in Delgado's preliminary file as a secondary node. Alex closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. The chain was longer than she had mapped it. Longer than Hargrove, longer than Sutter. It went into the intelligence preparation process itself, the place where the information that became 11-minute briefings was assembled. The place where confirmed and low complexity were decided before they were ever spoken aloud. The analyst is in custody, she said. As of 08:45, Reyes said. That was the second 0500 arrest. A pause. I want you to hear this clearly, Captain. The case you built last night, the statements from your element, the recorder, Delgado's file, the Hargrove transmission, it's not a piece of this investigation. It's the spine of it. Everything else is attaching to what you gave us. Alex looked at Max, who was on the floor beside her chair, his chin on his paws, his eyes tracking her face with the patient attention he had given her for 3 years. The spine was 36 dogs who didn't leave, Alex said. Reyes was quiet for a moment. Then put that in your statement too, she said, exactly as you said it. The transport to Bagram lifted at 1300. Alex sat in the back with Max and Cruz and Petra, and the specific exhaustion of people who had finished something that wasn't actually finished, who had closed the acute phase and opened the chronic one, and who understood that the chronic phase was going to be harder in different ways. Vasquez was on a separate medical transport, his ankle requiring imaging that Firebase Kilo couldn't provide. He had argued about this with the same determined jaw he'd used on the mountain, and he had lost the argument with the same grace. Cole had been cleared to travel with him, which had been the condition of his compliance, and the duty medic had accepted the condition without apparent distress. Atlas was on the same medical transport. Briggs had not been on it. Briggs was on this transport, which meant Briggs had arranged for Atlas to travel with a handler from the Kilo garrison, who had enough K9 experience to manage the transfer. And then Briggs had gotten on the wrong transport, so Atlas didn't see him leave. Alex had watched this happen and said nothing about it, because there was nothing to say that Briggs didn't already know. Cruz was watching her watch the transport disappear in the other direction. He'll be fine, Cruz said. I know. Atlas is tough. I know that too. Then what are you thinking about? Alex considered the question honestly. I'm thinking about the analyst at Bagram, the one who prepared the intelligence assessment for our mission. I'm thinking about how many other assessments he prepared, how many briefings those assessments became, how many 11-minute versions of our briefing happened in other rooms with other teams, and those teams walked out trusting the information they'd been given because that's what you do. You trust the process. Cruz was quiet. The process, Alex said, was broken at the source. Reyes is fixing it. Reyes is exposing it. Fixing takes longer. She looked at the floor of the transport, at Max's head on her boot. Fixing takes the kind of time that doesn't feel like action. It feels like waiting. And the people who were on those 23 routes don't get to wait. Cruz put his hand on her arm once. Not comfort exactly. Cruz didn't do comfort in the conventional sense. It was the gesture of someone acknowledging the weight of what you were carrying without trying to take it from you, because some weight was appropriate, and taking it away would be wrong. She let it land. Then she straightened and looked forward. Bagram at 1500 was a different world from Kunar province at midnight, and the gap between those two realities was the thing that always hit Alex hardest about coming back in. The compound noise, the movement, the administrative life of a large installation, all of it running on its own momentum. Most of it unaware that anything had happened 16 hours ago on a mountain 40 kilometers south. Reyes met them at the transport pad. She was shorter than her voice suggested, which Alex had learned was common among people whose authority resided entirely in what they did, rather than how they appeared. She had a direct handshake and the specific quality of attention that made you feel like the only person in the room, even when there were 30 people and 29 dogs around you. Captain Kane, she said. Warrant Officer Reyes, Alex said. Walk with me. They walked. Max stayed at Alex's left boot with the precision he used when he understood that the situation required it. Reyes glanced down at him once with an expression that was not surprise, exactly more like recognition. Delgado told me about the dogs, Reyes said. About how she made the decision to approach your perimeter. She trusted them, Alex said. She trusted their read of her, which is a different thing. Reyes moved through the compound with the purposeful navigation of someone who knew every route and used the fastest one. I've been doing this work for 12 years. Counter-corruption procurement fraud network infiltration. In 12 years, I've had 3 cases that were significant enough to change the structure of how things are done, rather than just removing the people who had broken the existing structure. She paused. This is the 4th. Because of the scope, Alex said. Because of the scope, yes, but also because of what Delgado's file documents and what the recorder corroborates. This network wasn't exploiting gaps in the oversight structure. It was using the oversight structure itself as cover. Hargrove was a logistics colonel. His access was legitimate. His role gave him exactly the kind of visibility that made him useful and exactly the kind of invisibility that let him operate. She stopped walking, turned to face Alex directly. The reforms that come out of this case are going to go above Hargrove, above Sutter. They're going to reach the process by which people like Hargrove are positioned in the first place, the vetting process. And the oversight of the vetters, Reyes said. It's recursive. It goes as deep as the evidence takes it, and the evidence... She glanced at the red case that was now in an evidence room, and would not be coming out until it had been documented and analyzed by people with the appropriate clearance, goes deep. Alex thought about the analyst who had prepared her mission briefing, about the intelligence assessment that had become 11 minutes of confirmed and low complexity and had sent 12 handlers and 36 dogs onto a mountain with a dangerously incomplete picture of what was waiting for them. About how many layers above that analyst the original decision to insert him into the intelligence preparation process had been made. What do you need from me? Alex said. Full deposition, formal sworn statement, availability for follow-up interviews over the next 3 months. Reyes paused. And I need you to understand that your element, every handler who was on that mountain, may be called to testify. Formally. At a level that will have a public component. They'll testify, Alex said. Every one of them. You know that without asking them. I know who I was on that mountain with, Alex said simply. Reyes looked at her for a moment. Then she nodded once, which had the quality of something final, and decided. There's one more thing. She reached into the folder she'd been carrying and produced a single sheet, a document with official headers that Alex read in 3 seconds and then read again. Effective 0900 this morning, the formal investigation into the events of last night has been designated a protected proceeding under the Inspector General Act. Every member of your element is covered. Any retaliatory action against any personnel involved in this case is now a federal offense. Alex looked at the document. Hargrove still has people in the net. He had people in the net, Reyes said. As of this morning, those people are either in custody or under investigation, or are not going to risk a federal retaliation charge on behalf of a man who is going to spend the remainder of his career in a courtroom. She took the document back. You're protected, Captain. Your people are protected. Do your deposition and let this process work. For the first time since 0430 the previous morning, Alex felt the full weight of the night settle and then not lift exactly but distribute. Spread across something wider than her own shoulders. The process that Reyes had built over 12 years and 11 weeks of Delgado's work, and 6 weeks of Holloway's reconnaissance, and a single night that had started as an 11-minute briefing and become something that was going to change how the structure worked. Where's Holloway? Alex said. Medical. Her arm is set. She's been debriefed and cleared, and she's been asking about you since she got here. Reyes almost smiled. It was a brief and precise expression. She's been asking specifically whether you and the dogs are accounted for, in that order. Mo. The medical facility was a 10-minute walk. Alex made it in 8, Max matching her pace without being asked. The two of them moving through the compound in the rhythm they'd established over 3 years and 115 missions, which was now the count. Holloway was sitting up in a medical bay with her right arm in a cast from wrist to elbow, and her left hand holding a cup of coffee, with the grip of someone who had decided that coffee was the one thing non-negotiable about recovery. She looked at Alex when she came through the door, with the same direct assessment she'd used at the bottom of the ravine, cataloging precise landing on conclusions before most people had finished forming questions. "You need that shoulder properly closed," Holloway said. "I'm aware. The medic here will do it in 20 minutes. After I sit down." "Sit down now. You've been on your feet for—" Holloway stopped, did the math. 15 hours. Closer to 16. Alex sat in the chair beside the bay. Max settled against her boots. "How's the arm?" "Set and casted and immobilized, and I've been told not to fly for 6 weeks. Holloway said it with the specific tone of someone who has been told something they intend to comply with and resent simultaneously. 6 weeks. You can spend it testifying. I've already been told. I'm looking forward to it. She said, looking forward to it the way people say it when they mean it as violence. The deposition starts tomorrow. Full sworn statement on the 6 weeks of reconnaissance, the recorder contents, and everything from last night. She paused. Reyes wants me on the stand when this goes to formal proceedings. She'll have you. She'll have all of us. Holloway looked at Max, who was watching her with the patient attention he gave people who were hurt and recovering. How is he? Fine. Checked out clean this morning. And Atlas? Surgery at 1300. Briggs is waiting. Holloway absorbed that. He ran on a fragment for an hour. He did. Because Briggs needed him to. Because the mission needed him to, Alex said. Briggs would have carried him the whole mountain if Atlas had let him. Atlas didn't let him. Holloway was quiet for a moment. Her coffee cup moved in her good hand. I've been in the Air Force for 9 years, she said. I've worked with ground teams. I've worked with SEAL elements, Rangers Special Forces. I've worked with some exceptional people. She paused. I've never worked with anything like what those dogs did last night. Most people haven't. The way they moved, the way they read the terrain, the contacts, the threats simultaneously, independently, and in complete coordination with each other. She shook her head slightly. No technology does that. Nothing we build comes close to what they are. No, Alex said. The blocking force. If Max hadn't stopped and turned west, we'd have walked into it. You would have walked into it. All of us. Holloway looked at the dog directly. He saved us before we knew we needed saving. Max looked back at her with the patient brown eyes that had been looking at Alex for 3 years, that had read 115 missions, and read this one with the same absolute commitment as the first, and that were now reading Sarah Holloway with the generous, uncomplicated attention he gave everyone who wasn't a threat. Holloway reached out with her good hand and put it on top of Max's head. Max leaned into it for exactly 1 second. Then he straightened and looked at Alex, checking in the small, regular confirmation that he had always done and that she had never stopped finding steadying. What happens to you now? Holloway said. After the deposition, after the investigation. I go back, Alex said. To the field. To the field? Holloway considered this. I expected you to say something different. Like what? Like you'd take leave, or request reassignment, or... She paused. You watched everything get compromised from the inside last night. The briefing, the routes, the intelligence preparation. You watched the process you operate inside turn into a weapon pointed at your own people. She looked at Alex steadily. A lot of people would decide the process isn't worth trusting anymore. Alex thought about this honestly. About the analyst and the briefing room, and Sutter at the back with his credentials and his quiet. About the 16 hours that had followed. About the dogs who had held the perimeter in every direction while the world sorted itself out. The process broke, she said. People broke it. People are being held accountable for breaking it. And the process is being rebuilt by someone who has spent 12 years learning exactly how it breaks and what it takes to fix it. She looked at Holloway. I trust Reyes. I trust Cruz. I trust every handler who was on that mountain. I trust what a dog's body tells me more than I trust most things made by human beings. She paused. That's enough to go back on. Holloway was quiet for a long moment. Her coffee cup was still in her hand. Max was at Alex's boot. Outside the medical facility, the compound moved with its ordinary institutional life, unaware and unslowed. "They're going to give you a commendation," Holloway said finally. "For last night, Reyes mentioned it. The handlers should be commended, the dogs should be formally recognized. They will be. All of them." Holloway looked at her with the expression she'd had at the bottom of the ravine when she'd said, "You are exactly what I was told you were. I'm going to make sure of it personally. I'm going to put it in my deposition, my formal statement, and every follow-up interview they schedule. I'm going to say the same thing every time until it's in the official record in language that can't be redacted." She straightened. "The K9 units saved this mission. The K9 units preserved the intelligence that is the foundation of this investigation. That goes in the record as fact, not footnote." Alex looked at her for a moment. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me, it's accurate." Holloway almost smiled the same compressed, genuine expression from the mountain, the one that cost her something, and meant it. "Accurate is all I've ever tried to be." 3 weeks later, in a room at the Pentagon with a level of classification that meant Alex had signed 4 documents before being allowed to sit down, Warrant Officer Reyes presented the consolidated findings of the investigation to a panel that included people whose names Alex had seen only on organizational charts. Hargrove had been formally charged. Sutter had entered a plea arrangement. The analyst had been charged alongside 2 senior officers whose connection to the network Sutter's 11 minutes and subsequent cooperation had made documentable. The Cyprus account had been traced to 7 years of transactions. The number of compromised convoy routes was 61. The reclassified engagements were 38. Alex sat in the room and listened to the numbers become official and felt each one land in the place where the night on the mountain lived. Delgado sat 2 chairs to her left, still in the specific quiet of someone who had spent 11 weeks running alone and had not yet fully recalibrated to the reality of not running alone. She was going to be fine. Alex had been watching her for 3 weeks and had concluded this with the same certainty she applied to dog reads and mission math. Holloway sat across the table in a sling that was 2 weeks from coming off her good hand on a notepad. Her eyes on the panel, her expression, the controlled professional focus of someone who had been waiting 6 weeks for this room and was not going to waste a second of it. Cruz was not in the room. His formal deposition had been completed the previous week, and he was back in the field, which was where Cruz was always going to be, because Cruz understood as Alex understood that the field was not the problem. The problem had been in the rooms between the field and the truth, and those rooms were now being cleaned. After the formal presentation, the panel chair, a general whose name Alex had seen on 4 organizational charts and 2 commendation orders, asked if Captain Kane had anything to add to the record. Alex thought about the 11-minute briefing, about the words confirmed and low complexity and standby, about the 11 handlers who had taken the order to retreat and the 36 dogs who had not moved, and the specific electric stillness of 36 animals simultaneously deciding that this mission was not over. She thought about Max at her left boot where he always was. "Yes," she said. "I have something to add." She added it. All of it. The briefing and the dogs and the ridge and the recorder and the blocking force that should have ended them and didn't, because 36 animals had read the night more accurately than every compromised human system between Firebase Bravo and Bagram. She said it in the flat sequential way of a formal deposition, and she said it without editorializing, and she let the record be what the record needed to be. And when she finished, she said one more thing, because Holloway had said she would put it in every statement until it was in the record as fact and not footnote, and Alex owed Holloway the same. 36 military working dogs held the perimeter when the orders, the intelligence, and the command structure had all been compromised, she said. They held it because that is what they are, not tools, not equipment, not assets. Partners. They read the truth when everything designed by human beings to find the truth had been corrupted. They stayed when they were ordered to leave. They led when the leadership above them had failed. She looked at the panel. That goes in the record, not as a commendation, as a fact. Because the next person who sits in an 11-minute briefing and hears confirmed and low complexity needs to know what actually held the line. The room was quiet. The general wrote something on his notepad. The record was made. Outside that room in a kennel facility, 3 buildings over, Max was eating his morning meal with the focused efficiency he brought to everything. And when Alex came back through the door 2 hours later, he looked up at her, once checking in, confirming the small regular communication of 3 years and 115 missions, and then went back to his food because she was back, and the work was done. And everything that needed to be said between them had already been said on a mountain in Kunar province in the dark. Some truths don't need words. Some loyalty doesn't need orders. And some lines are held not by rank or by command, but by the ones who never needed to be told what it meant to stay.